We went back to the college. The year ended. What was I going to do? I didn't know. Anyway, I'd heard Rosalind and I, by this time, we decided we were going to get married. We were going to get married in the August of 1967. So it was 64, 65 to 67, the academic year. We're going to get married. I applied for a job working at St. George's Crypt in the city of Leeds in Northern England, an Anglican church, working with homeless men whose lives are being destroyed through alcoholism and other issues, but mainly alcoholism. I got the job. I started work in the beginning of September. We got married on August the 19th, 1967. It was demanding, challenging work. And it was an Anglican church. And we started worshipping at a Methodist church, but the nature of the work meant that I often had to be at work on a Sundays. And on a Sundays, the men would go into the church, these homeless men. And we had to go and we'd sit with the men. Well, for the first time in my life, I came across evangelical Anglicans. Now, my background by this time was strongly Methodist, Bible-believing, Christ-centered. I would sit in this church with 1,000 people. Book of Common Prayer. It was amazing. And I knew that God was working in my life. I had to decide what I was going to do. Was I going to stay at the crypt, which the pay was just minimal. And I knew I needed some kind of qualifications. So was I going to be a social worker? By this time I got O levels and A levels. I was very interested in becoming a solicitor, studying law. But one morning, the suffragan bishop of the town of Knaresborough near Harrogate, not far from Leeds, came and preached a sermon at it was an ordination of 2 young men. And that morning, as he preached on the text, no other foundation has been laid other than that which has been laid by Jesus Christ, I knew, surprisingly, that God was calling me into the Anglican ministry. I went off. The process of getting into the Anglican church, into a seminary, I tell you, it was like breaking into Fort Knox. I remember going to one of the interviews at a weekend for prospective ordinance, and this very elderly archdeacon said to me, "Now, my boy, I see that you're a Methodist and you're a Methodist lay preacher. Why on earth would you want to become an Anglican minister?" I said, "I believe God's called me." He said, "I can't argue with that." And that was it. I went to Oak Hill Theology. We moved to London. I was able to get grants to go through theological college, through seminary. Rosalind, who lived in a village and spent 1 year in the city of Leeds, needed to get a job. While we were waiting to begin at the college, she got a letter from the principal saying, "Rosalind, we have been through the list of new wives, and I believe, with my secretary, that you should be offered the job of assistant secretary at the seminary." Rosalind had never done any secretarial work at all. She could hardly type. She got the job. We went to Oak Hill. We spent 3 glorious years there. I graduated. It was amazing. It wasn't easy because I was in a very academic environment. People who'd got degrees from Oxford, Cambridge, other universities. There was me. It wasn't easy, but I'll tell you, God's hand was upon all of this. And one of the persons who really was a great blessing was George Carey, who became Archbishop of Canterbury and who at the time was New Testament lecturer. He helped me. He worked with me. The whole staff gave themselves to all of the students, but George Carey was amazing. I owe so much to that man. I really do. Both George and his wife, Eileen. Well, after 3 years, I graduated. I went to a curacy in a place called Macclesfield in the Diocese of Chester. I had a wonderful vicar by the name of Brian Reeve. I remember one Monday morning at the staff meeting, he said, "Now, Geoffrey, tell me, give me an outline of your sermon that you preached yesterday." I sat there looking at him. And he said, "Do you realize, Geoffrey, if you can't give me an outline of your sermon 2 minutes after I've asked you the question, that does it make you question how much you think the congregation have remembered?" Boy, every Monday morning I had that staff meeting. I went with that sermon outline so ingrained on my mind that I was able to give. Guess what? Only once after that did he ever ask me again what my sermon outline was, because he got the message through to me. We met for morning prayer every morning, apart from when my day off was. It was amazing. It was amazing. Well, I'd been in the curacy for 3 years. The process in England was, and I think it still is, after 3 years, you move on, just automatic. A curacy is very much a learning time, a continuance of your seminary education while you're doing parish work. It was then that I developed a love for visitation. Brian would have me visiting most afternoons of the week. 2 afternoons of the week, I would spend at least an hour doing chaplaincy work in the hospital. It was amazing. I can honestly say I developed a love for parish ministry that has never left me. I developed a love for knocking on doors, introducing myself, saying to people, this is who I am. This is who I'm representing, the Lord Jesus. Well, what was I going to do after 3 years? The vicar announced that he was leaving and moving to another parish. Guess who had the interregnum? Me. After about 6 or 7 months, a new minister, a vicar as we're referred to in England, came. Delightful fellow. And he wanted me to stay, but I knew I had to go. I knew I had to go because I knew where a lot of the people were showing their allegiance to. It was to my ministry. We looked at several parishes. We knew that none of them was suitable. God wasn't calling us to them. They didn't want us. We didn't want them. One of the parishes was just a 45-minute from where Rosalind's parents lived, but it wasn't to be. Well, my mum's sister, my birth mother's sister, lived in a place called Bolton, Ontario. And I'd only met her once in my life when she came to England. And we always kept in touch. Rosalind and I decided we'd like to come and see her. So, middle of August, we came to Canada for a 6-week visit. First time we'd ever flown. We flew dressed. Rosalind dressed up, me with a collar and tie and a suit. We arrived in Toronto. We met with my Auntie Dorothy and her husband, Uncle Tom. We stepped outside the airport and I thought we were going to die. It was hot, it was humid, and there we were, so English, I'll tell you. The only shorts I wore were running shorts because I began running at Oak Hill. I took my running seriously. Most of the time, these two very proper English people, we never wore shorts for a whole 6 weeks in Canada. It was hot. It was beautiful. We went back to England after 6 weeks. I knew that I had to begin looking again for another parish. About 10 days after being back in England, I opened the Church of England newspaper, and there was a little advertisement. The Bishop of the Arctic, John R. Sperry, will be coming to England and would be interested in meeting with young men who would have an interest in serving in the Anglican Diocese of the Arctic. I said to Rosalind, that's us. She said, yes, it is. When I was in Oak Hill Theological College, once a month we had prayer. On Saturday morning we'd have prayer, a prayer time for people who were serving the Lord overseas. And I remember that we would receive occasionally these prayer letters from an Anglican minister who was serving in Eskimo Point, which is now known as Arviat. I listened to these newsletters from this minister whose name is David. And I think, that sounds interesting. Wow. Working with the Inuit people. Left theological college, never crossed my mind. God's hand was upon our life. I wrote to Bishop Sperry, and he's representative in England. I wrote to him. I got a letter back from Bishop Sperry saying he would like to meet us. We arranged, he came to our home towards the end of October, and it was pouring with rain. He arrived, but as soon as Bishop Sperry entered our home, we felt a commonality, a kinship in the Lord. We had lunch together. He talked about the North. He talked about the community that he would like to send us to. We knew there was no point in looking for another community, for another parish. We knew that we were coming to Canada. He said to us, now, when you make application, of course, you have to go through, you have to apply for immigration. It could take months to get through immigration. And he said, a long time. December, we met him in October. We began the process. We were accepted for the diocese. We applied for immigration in about the third week in November. The day after Boxing Day, 1975, I went to the mailbox, and guess what? We were approved for immigration. It had taken less than 2 months, about 6 weeks. I gave my notice to the parish. Guess what? Bishop Sperry said, I want you to come over by boat. It'll give you a holiday. It'll give you a rest. The longshoremen in Montreal went on strike. This strike went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. So we spent time living at Rosalind's home, by this time I'd been reunited with my parents through our wedding. My wife's mother said, now, Geoffrey, are you going to invite your mother and father? I said, no. She said, Geoffrey, you're a Christian. You've got to forgive. We invited them. They came to the wedding. It was a restored relationship, even though they didn't go to church. So we lived with them. It was over a period of 3 months. It wasn't easy, but we did it. By April, it was 74 when we made application. By April of 1975, we were in Canada. And by that time, the diocesan office was on Avenue Road in Toronto. We spent a few days there. We spent a few days with my aunt and uncle in Bolton, Ontario. We traveled across Canada by train. We spent time in Edmonton at a wonderful Anglican church, St. Paul's, Edmonton. And that became sort of our home church. Those people loved us, supported us, prayed for us, provided accommodation, providing a vehicle when we came out on vacation.